Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome back to the Maker's Cave, and this is part 3 of our 3-part series on the Anycubic Kobra Max printer. The first video we did the assembly of it. The second one we did use Pronterface to do some fine tuning, and now we get to do the fun stuff. We get to do some test prints. Now, along with all the other tools and everything that came with the printer, it came with an SD card. It also came with a converter for regular USB port, but my computer right over here happens to have a micro SD card reader in it. And on this are some test prints and the version of Cura Ultimaker. I would imagine it's for this printer. So we're going to put it in here and we're going to install that version of Cura. Okay, so you saw a brief shot of me installing the CuraMaker 4.2 version that comes on the chip with this printer. Now, I used the computer here. I also used it on my main computer at my desk. And each time I installed the version that's on here, it would not run. It wouldn't start. The icon was there. I double-clicked it. It did nothing. So what I think I'm going to have to do is on this machine, I'm going to download the regular version of Cura, which is a free slicing program, and I'm going to install that, and then I'll show you how to make a profile for this printer. Just a quick note, I'm not going to show you how to install Ultimaker Cura, the latest version, which is 5.1, on your computer, because we want to get to the fun stuff, which is printing, and that's a video into itself about installing software and everything. So if you do need some help installing Cura, just drop a note in the comments before, and I'll send you some notes on how to do it. Like I said before, Cura is a great slicing program, but it does not have a profile for the Anycubic Kobra Max. So we're just going to make one. So what we're going to do is you're going to start Ultimaker. Now, as you can see, I already have a profile set up for the Anycubic Vyper. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this drop-down box right here, and we're going to choose Add Printer. And down here under Add a Non-Networked Printer, drop that down, and right after the Ultimaker selections, you're going to see Custom. So you click Custom, then you make sure that the radio button for Custom FFF Printer is chosen. You come over here to the right, and we will delete out that name, and we're going to put in Anycubic Kobra Max, and we'll click Add. So the next box that shows up is where you put all the parameters for your printer. I'm basically going to put those parameters in from the width and the length from this white line to this white line, and on the front to back, or the Y in between these white lines. So it's 390 millimeters by 400 millimeters, and the Z height is 450. So let's go back to Cura, and right here on the Y, you never want to go edge to edge on your build plate for these numbers. So that's why I chose those white grid lines as a good starting point. So we're going to put the Y-axis, or the width, at 390, and we're going to put the Y, or the length, or the depth rather, at 400 millimeters. And then we're going to make the Z height 400, or 450 rather. Okay, you can keep the build plate size as rectangular. Skip the origin at center. You want to make sure you have heated bed checked. The G-code flavor is Marlin, which is what we're using. And over here on the print head settings, you can keep all those as they are. You don't have to touch them. Now you're going to click Extruder 1 tab up top here. Okay, and the nozzle size as default out of the box is 0.4 millimeters. The compatible material diameter, most filament that you use is going to be 1.75, so you're going to want to back that up, get that out of there, put in 1.75. Okay, the nozzle offset, cooling fan numbers, all those you don't have to worry about, and you can just click Next, and that is it. Now I'm going to go back up here to Manage. I'm going to go back up here where it says Kobra Max, and I'm just going to pick Manage Printers again, and I'm going to come down to Printers. I want to come down to Kobra Max over here, and I'm going to do Machine Settings, I wanted to go over one thing. Down here on the start and end code, okay, I found all kinds of different things you could put in here. This is basically your standard G code that will run before and after your print. I pretty much left it as is. If you want more expansion on the knowledge of this, we can make a video if you want, and I can try some different stuff. There's a couple people out here who already have the Kobra Max who have tweaked the starting and ending G code but I think I'm just going to use the default right now. I don't want to throw too many things at this since it's a brand new printer and it's the first time we used it. So here we are at the screen that shows you the bed size for the printer. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to load up our first test print. Now I've made some test print objects up already for the Kobra Max, and the first thing I think I'm going to do is a layer test. So this is the layer test that I have loaded in. It's actually for the Anycubic Vyper, and as you can see I can fit 4 of these on the build plate compared to 1 on the Vyper. There's some printing on the inside, there's a skirt line going around it, and what it does is each one of these squares is 0.2 millimeters tall. And what that'll do is that'll lay these squares all over this bed so we can make sure we're getting an even uniform laydown of the lines. All we're going to do is copy that test file from the hard drive over to the removable disk for the Kobra Max. Now we'll put this SD card into the printer and we'll start the print. So the first thing we're going to have to do is load the filament. So just like we did for our test in the previous video, we're just simply going to go to prepare. We're going to do preheat ABS, and we're going to wait till that comes up into temperature. It comes up to temperature, which is 240 degrees for the nozzle. All right, the nozzle's up to temperature, so we're just going to take our green filament, put it through the tube like we did in the previous video. Push it until you feel some resistance. And you come over here, we'll back up one screen, we'll do filament, and we'll do filament in, and you just give it a push, a little bit of a nudge until the motors grab it, and then you have to wait until the filament loads in. Now you'll have to take my word for it, but the filament is now oozing out, so we come over here and we push stop. We just need to put our SD card right in here, gold contacts up, go back to the main menu, and you want to choose print, and then a list of all your files on the SD card shows up. Here's mine right here. If it doesn't show up, by the way, you can always hit the refresh button right there, and that should bring it up. And let's see, ours is the first one, which is I labeled a layer test, so I'm going to click that. And now I'm going to choose print. And now the printer should start printing. Now don't forget, we already auto-leveled this in the previous video, so I didn't have to do that this time because we had done that before. The nozzle heated up pretty quickly. What we're waiting for is the bed to hit 80 degrees. It's at 78 right now. This is the real fun and exciting part. I can't wait to see how this thing prints. Okay, we hit 80 degrees, so the printer is now starting to print. It's homing. It's going to find its 0 position on the X and Y. And the first thing it's doing is it's laying down a skirt, which is a perimeter around the entire image that we want drawn or printed. It's going to do this 5 times. One of the good reasons is to draw a skirt around your object is to make sure that the filament is flowing good by the time it gets to starting your print. What I'm doing now is, even though this is the skirt, I'm looking at how the skirt is printing out, and it looks like it's pretty uniform throughout the whole bed. So that's pretty good, which that tells us that the auto leveling did a pretty good job. But all the lines look nice and clean. That's pretty impressive. So, but when it prints those squares, that'll really tell us exactly how much material it's laying down and how uniform it is. Some people watching this who are experienced in 3D printing may find that me laying down 5 skirts around the perimeter of this is excessive. The reason why I've done that is I found on the Vyper and even sometimes on the Ender, if I don't put enough skirt lines around here, it really makes this tough to get off the build plate. So with 5 layers, skirting. That should make it easy for me to peel this off the plate. I am also noticing that this is a very quiet printer. You may be hearing some noise through my mic, but this isn't bad. If I left this room right now, I wouldn't even know that this thing is running. Okay, it is now done doing the skirt around the perimeter of the print. It's now actually starting to print those squares. So that's going to take about a half hour. So we'll speed this up a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll see what our results are. The layer test is complete. Move this bed down here. Let's see if we can get you in here for a close-up on this. Here's all the squares that are printed. They're printed at a 0.2 millimeter height. And I have to say, although you can't read the wording that's in here, I have never been able on any printer to get these to show up. So I'm disregarding the fact that you can't, the lettering in here didn't show up. What I'm looking for, though, is how well it did the corners. There is some stringing between each unit, but that could be the heat I had set for this. So like I said, I'm looking for how well the corners are done, and I'm looking to see if the layer height is all the same. What's nice about this green is it's a little translucent when it's this thin. So I can actually use that as a good measurement to see the evenness of how much the layers were put down. And I have to say, all of them, even though some are up here on the screen, you can't see them, all the layers are laid down at the same height. So this is really impressive. This means the auto bed leveling worked right out of the box. Now, some people were complaining that the prints were so laid down on this glass that they wouldn't come off. I am not finding that. These seem to be scraping off rather easy. So next we're going to print out a calibration cube, and here it is right here. This is 20 millimeters on each side. This will tell us exactly how well it's printing on the X, Y, and Z axis. Now, this printer supposedly prints up to 180 millimeters per second. We did that last layer test at 60 mils per second, or 60 millimeters per second. I'm going to bump this cube up to 100 millimeters per second, and let's see how accurate it is at that. So we're going to click 100 right here. Then we'll click slice. So it's going to take 28 minutes to print this. We are going to save this to, we'll click save to disk. Now we have that saved to the SD card. We'll put that in there and we'll start the print. Okay, the bed and the nozzle are up to temperature. It's going to home. It's going to print that cube out at 100 millimeters per second print speed. We'll come back in a half hour and see how it did.
A few moments later.
Okay, the printing stopped, and there's an error on the screen that says hotbed heater abnormal. Please check it and the wiring. And I guess we're going to do some troubleshooting.
20 minutes later.
Okay, the last we left, you saw the error I was getting with the heat bed. I did that same cube, that calibration cube. I tried printing that 3 more times, and each time, about a couple minutes into, not even a couple minutes into the print, it would stop printing and it would give me that error on the screen. I said, okay, what's going on? Because the layer test came out fine. So for some reason, I decided, let me try printing the layer test again. So I didn't film it, but I printed the layer test, and it started to print just fine, no problems. It went for about 5 minutes, so I stopped it. So then I went back and tried printing the calibration cube again, and after a minute or so, it stopped printing. So I said, okay, well, let's do what everybody does. Let's go to Google. So I started to do some research, and research, and one person had this problem. And they said that on small prints where the print head just stays in one particular area, they found that turning off cooling in Cura, there's an option to cool the parts, which means the fan runs to cool the parts as it's printing. This sometimes helps with delamination and curling and things like that. Doesn't always affect it, but sometimes. So they said the minute they turned this off, they could get it to print, and they never got that error. So I came back in here, I went into Cura, I redid the file for the calibration cube, and this time I turned off the option to cool the parts. And so far this thing has been running for about oh, I guess a good 5 minutes, and we have a good 3 or 4 millimeters built up on the bottom of the cube, and it has not shut off. So apparently, here's what I'm no 3D expert. I've always said that. I'm just here doing this for you guys. You know, I love 3D printing, and you're learning along with me. So here's what I think is happening. I think that the fan is so strong on this hot end that it's cooling off the, not only is it cooling off the parts like it's supposed to, but it's also cooling off a section of the bed. So that is now throwing the bed into a misalignment because it senses what the heating is here, a certain temperature, but the fan is so strong it's actually cooling off this section of the bed. So there's a big discrepancy. Remember we did those PID settings in the previous video? There's a big discrepancy now between what this temperature is and what the temperature where it's printing is at. So it thinks there's something wrong with the thermistor that judges the heat, so it shuts the machine down. Now, I think when we do large prints, okay, where that print head is constantly moving and it's not in one particular area, I bet you dollars to donuts, whoever thought of that expression, dollars to donuts, that it is not going to stop printing. So we're going to print this calibration cube. It's printing right now at 100 millimeters per second. We'll come back when it's all done and we'll see how well it printed. The cube is all done printing, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. There's a little bit of stringing right there in the printing of the X. The Z, perfect. And let's find the Y. The Y is good too. Okay, and there is a little bit of stringing or blobbing right down here, but that's probably because of the speed as to which we printed this. 100 millimeters per second is pretty quick. Now here's the important thing we're going to do right here is we're going to take our digital calipers right here. Let's see what we have here on the Y. So we have 19.92 on the Y. On the X, 19.88 or almost 19.9. Now let's do the Z. 19.6 on the Z. Wow, that's pretty good. So that means this thing is pretty much well calibrated on the X, Y, and the Z. It's doing pretty good. So I think what we're going to do now is let's get to the fun stuff. Let's print something really interesting besides a test print, like a cube or a layer. Let's pick an object. You know, this thing came with an owl on the test card. So I think what we'll do is we will print the owl. And here's the owl that came on the SD card that came with the printer. I've already pulled it into Ultimaker Cura. I've already sliced it. It's going to take 4 hours and 46 minutes to print. And here's what I wanted to show you under the settings under cooling. Under fan speed, it has a 100%. Regular fan speed is 100%. And maximum fan speed is 100%. Regular maximum speed threshold, I don't know what that is. But here's what's really interesting. Initial fan speed, I set that at 0%. And then I set the regular fan speed height at 5 millimeters. So the regular fan speed is 100%. So and that comes out to about 100 layers in. So at 100 layers in or 5 millimeters above the build plate, the fan is going to start to turn on at 100%. I'm hoping that takes care of our problem where we're printing in one small particular area, like that log that the owl is sitting on, and that'll allow this printer to complete, so I won't have that problem I had with the cube. So we're going to save this to the SD card and we'll start printing. And here's the owl being printed. So it looks like having that fan turn on after there's 5 millimeters of material built up really worked, because this time the machine did not shut down, even though we were printing it in the same small area like we did with the cube. Looks like we fixed that problem. It looks like it's pretty good quality so far. 4.5 hours later, we're done. Let's go take a look at it. So here's the owl. The plate has cooled and the part comes right off. I have had no problems with parts sticking to this plate like some people have complained about. I think Anycubic may have changed the design of this plate since the first time this printer was released, so I'd rather like this glass plate. So let's go and take a look at our owl here. First off, I'm super impressed with the quality. I don't know if you're going to be able to see in here, but the breaks in the wood, you know, as if the log is splitting, are there. The detail is there in the feet. There's even right down here, there's detail lines for the nails of his feet. Now there is some stringing right here. I think if we printed this again, that wouldn't be there. I think there was some debris on the nozzle from the previous prints, and it broke off when it was printing here and layered itself into here. There is some stringing up here on his ears, horns, whatever the owl has up here. That could easily comes off and is nipped off and cleaned up. I think if we did some more fine tuning on the settings for this owl, the stringing wouldn't be there. The retraction speed might have to be adjusted. Maybe even the heat is a little too high. I don't know. But what I want to draw your attention to is, and I'm going to try and bring this as close as I possibly can. Okay, I want you to look at the back of that owl. That's almost resin quality printing right there. There are no distinguishable layer lines on there whatsoever. This is just incredible. And let's go over here and look at the wings. Again, here's the detailing for the feathering of the wings. No discernible layer lines. We're going to come across the front on his chest. Same thing. The scaling where the feathering is, where the feathers are supposed to be. Absolutely incredible. I mean, again, let's go to the back of this. That is absolutely smooth. I am super impressed with this print. And this is not G-code that they sent me to print. All they did is they sent me the STL. I brought it into Cura and used the settings that you saw me set up to get this thing to print out. So, man, again, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but this thing is really impressive. I can't believe how smooth this is. So this was our last and final test print here. So let's go and review this printer. So let's go over the Anycubic Kobra Max printer. In part one, you saw me assembling it. Part two, you saw me fine tuning it. And of course, in this video, we did some test prints like the owl down here. So what are my overall impressions? Okay, I'll just start off right off the top. I think this printer is worth every penny you pay for it. Depending on where you get it, you can pay anywhere between $540 and $600. I think it's closer to $600 on Anycubic site. If you are going to purchase it, I would recommend getting it from Anycubic site themselves, because that way you've got their full warranty behind them. Having a good company with a good warranty behind a 3D printer, especially when you're spending, $600 is pretty important. Like I said, I've had to call them a couple times or send them emails, and they've gotten back to me within 24 hours. One time was with the problem with, fine tuning, as you saw in the one video. So let's go over some checkpoints. Ease of assembly. Oh, check mark. It went together very easy. I had no problems whatsoever, as you saw. Setting it up was, again, another check mark. Very easy to set up. I showed you how to fine tune it. We had one small burp or blip, if you want to call it, in the settings, but we easily worked around that, and it wasn't even a problem. It was just a design of the machine, and I showed you how to do that. Test prints. Well, what can we say? You saw the owl. I mean, this is just incredible. Like I said, the back, unbelievable. So yeah, big old check mark on quality of prints. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. You got a 16-point bed leveling, which worked the first time without any adjustments. It auto bed leveled and it printed perfect. It was an even layer all throughout, as you saw in the second video. And obviously because of this, I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, this may quickly replace the other 3D printers as my favorite machine, especially with the big build plate. We have some Halloween projects coming up and some other things, and this is just going to be terrific. I mean, the next thing I want to do is I want to print a life-size skull on this for some Halloween props that I want to do. So my mind is just reeling with what we can do with a space this big. I'll put a link below to Anycubic site and where you can get this if you want it. Any of the supplies or anything that I used today, I'll put a link to, like software. It was mostly all software. All the machine came with plenty of hardware. It came with an extra, this is actually a pin right here to help clean out the nozzle. It came with some lubricant, like you can grease the gears up if they need it. It came with the SD card with some software on it. We saw how the Cura version that came on the SD card wouldn't work for me, so I just downloaded the full version of Cura and I showed you how to go about setting that up. Here is also a mini micro SD card reader. So if you don't have a micro SD card reader on a computer, they give you an adapter so you can easily use a USB port. Gives you all the wrenches and Allen wrenches and regular wrenches. It gives you all that in there. So the only tools really you needed was what came with it. The only thing you really had to do was add some software to it, which I showed you how to do. So if you like this video and you felt it, it helped you along with your little 3D printing adventure, be sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more of what we're doing, be sure to hit subscribe. And if you want to be notified when more of my videos come out, be sure to hit that bell and you'll get notified. So until our next adventure in making something, I'm Steve. Thanks for stopping by the Maker's Cave. I'll see you then.